$40,000. He asked that we keep that, and they keep that one, which of course we agreed to. And then in addition, they'll still be on reserve $960,000. So when you add those four things up, the reserve should be about $5.4 million after the drawdown, if they were comfortable with that.
So, John, can you just, for the board, speak to what the pre-pandemic numbers look like, just so the board has some context?
Right. So, the reason the reserve got higher than usual is it came from the 2 years when we were not in session 100% of the time, the 2019-20 year, 2019-20, and 2020-21. First of those, schools closed in March, and when we closed the books and records, there was $2.4 million unencumbered, primarily from staffing that we didn't need, busing that we didn't need, and so on and so forth, utilities. The following year, we did not open full-time in September. It wasn't until January, and so there were fewer costs as well. And so in that second COVID year, $2.8 million was unencumbered at the end of June. And in both cases, those monies went back to the city, and that's what boosted the reserve up where it is. I'd like to think that it's those monies that we're drawing down really for pandemic reasons, because we had trouble filling the positions. Some would argue that the reason health insurance claims are higher is because there wasn't as much preventive care during the height of the pandemic. People weren't going to the doctors as much, and we are seeing a number of more individual high-cost claims than we normally would. Our brokers tell us that's one of the reasons it's so high. So I think it's all connected. It's those 2 years that brought the money up.
So I'm not here over here. The new reading program wasn't decided on until this part of the academic year. There were two of the mandated programs that we had a choice, and we chose the one that has fit standard, but of course there was a good chunk of money. And we might want to take it there next year. And then they wanted it to go from K to 5, not just to K to 3, which makes a lot of sense. And that's where I see cost fund correct.
It is.
So this is the reading program.
Right, and Lisa, I'm mentioning the other things because we didn't realize those savings, then in combination with the reading program and these other outstanding issues, the money had to come from somewhere. So we pay for it. We have two big bills essentially in front of us. The 23-24 items that I had discussed, given a quick overview, plus the reading program. The reading program is certainly typically the reserves are available for unexpected costs. And this certainly meets the criteria for that. We thought initially with the savings, we would figure out how to pay for this internally. We can't do both. We can't, the savings that we did not realize plus the reading program, we can't do both. The cleanest way is to address the reading program with the reserve monies and find another way to pay for all of it. So we have over $6 million that needs to be made up for 23-24, the reading program.
6 million we have to make up. So we have to make up 6 million, so we have 3 plus an additional 3 we have to make up.
I didn't see that.
So it's really I call it a two-pronged approach. To get to the 4.7 million, we're asking partly for reserves to be brought down, but we're also looking to reduce our planned spending, primarily in 3 areas. some of the supplies and materials that we had planned to purchase, we're gonna defer that. We're going to reduce our utility budgets. That was at the suggestion of the city finance director. Utility costs, or utility prices have come down a little since February, they were really peaking. And then some staffing positions that because of enrollment shifts, we don't think we'll need. We're gonna put those three things together, come up with 1.6 million of called board money. So we like to think we're doing our part. We're not asking the city for everything, a combination approach.
I'm just wondering if this would allow us to keep the police money. This would allow us to keep the music program and those cuts that we were talking about having to make.
Yes, yes.
John, can I just ask you a question? I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. You mentioned 4 aspects of the reserves dollars that had to be kept, and the last one I think you said was 960,000 or so. Can you clarify what that is? What you're asking us to keep? Because you talked about the workers' comp, you talked about the reserves for the.
It will be undesignated, it's just what was left. We didn't need to ask for it. And the city said, we want you to keep these other 3 things intact. So just really give us the remainder.
So they didn't ask us to keep the 960 on there, it's just we're choosing.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
One more quick question. So the reserves are basically for insurance, payments, claims, workers' comp, like that. So we're taking some of the reserves for insurance claims. And the reserve fund was established when we started to self-insure, correct?
yes, but that will remain. We won't take that down. What we're really taking down are those balances we've given back the last couple of years.
Okay.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, so whatever's left over from the year before has to go back to the city.
Yes.
Okay. And we have to have a minimum for we have to, because our carrier, we have to have a minimum in that reserve.
When you're self-insured like we are, yes.
And we're keeping that in there.
Yes, and a little more.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else?
My question,
Speak to the mic.
I have it, my question would be, we're making this motion tonight. Does the city have alternative not to move forward with our request? Yes or no?
The answer is yes to that. That's why we did some preliminary work with the finance director and with a representative from the mayor's office. Al Russo joined us for that. We laid out the problem, explained why it happened the way it happened, and at least the mayor's office and the finance office are supporting our request. So we think we're in as best shape as we can be going to the city council.
And Ms. Cooper, it's our understanding that meeting will take place in August.
I'm sorry,
It is our understanding that meeting will take place in August with city council. It will be on the agenda in August.
and my final question would be, and I think we're very clear about that, so, because there's so much, rumbling, and I'm gonna use that word, rumbling in the community about the money, and everybody knows where the money is and what the money is supposed to be. I guess my final question is, as we talk about the reading program, and we know that we need this within our schools and it's mandated. When we put together the budget, was that amount included in the budget?
No, it was not.
No. Okay. Thank you.
So the discussion of drawing down on the reserve already took place, City Hall? So they're aware that we're gonna come in with this request.
They are.
So the meeting happened already, and so this was already part of their conversation.
You know, one of that, they gave me some homework to do. They asked me to go back and look at our utility budgets. So I gave along with Chip Volpe, the city purchasing agent. They asked us to confirm the amount for the health insurance reserve with our broker. So I did that too. And with those two homework assignments done, we're ready to move.
So this happened before we voted on our budget, or this happened?
Maybe 3 weeks ago,
Thank you.
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So I just wanna make sure, given that we're asking for this $3 million out of one-time funding source, is the intention to spend this on the breeding program, which is gonna be a one-time expense? So it's like even transaction in that way, we're not gonna come up short from the following year because we've taken some of that money and applied it.
Correct, it will be, to this point in time, it's a cost.
Okay, thank you.
The 1.5 million for the unexpected claims, are those spread across the district, or is that only clustered into?
With our broker consultant, Gallagher, and along with Cigna, our carrier, they attributed to a much larger number of individuals with claims more than $50,000. They call those high-cost claims. And when they look at the number of people, it's historically not close to what we usually have. So we've pressed them. They think that would continue. They did not say yes. So and right now, we're thinking it's a phenomenon really related to the pandemic and people coming out of that.
So district wide?
Yes, district-wide.
Anything else I'd like to move this call forward?
I'm gonna be real quick. We came out of this, the budget process, and the mayor, and he was kind of saying that the school system was fully 100%, 150% fully funded. And that was not true, right? So, I think everybody shook their head, oh yeah, everything was great. But it was just for this year, so we're still sure. So, that word fully funded, I don't know who came up with it, but we need to be very clear as to what was funded, what we're going into the next section with, and what we're going to be needing. So to say the mayor did a great job to the Board of Ed, fully funding us, he did.
Well, I'm gonna clarify that.
Okay.
Well, we approved the budget based on what our professional team here put forward, that would fully fund us, which was the ask.
Right.
That was what we asked for. The mayor did give what we asked for. So, we were fully funded based off of our request from the mayor.
Right.
Okay, so two different things. What happened after was, we discovered that we're short. So, we approved the budget as a board, we put it forward to the mayor, we asked for 9 million, he gave the 9 million. So he fully funded our request. So I'm not one of the defense city hall, you guys know that, but the fact is that we asked for it, he gave it. So it was funded from the city. The problem lies, a couple months later, a month later, we didn't find this, we didn't find that. So at the time of the budget that we proposed, it was awarded the full ask. So that's where everybody gets the fully funded from. Right. So just for clarification. So I'd like to move forward with this vote. We have a second, we have discussion, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. All right. Discussion. Both superintendent goals. I'm assuming that's why the two schools are here. They know our 10-minute rule on presentations?
Yes, and we're all part of the discussion this evening. So just wanted to quickly say to the board, typically our goals are discussed and agreed upon somewhere between November and January. And I think this evening we're well positioned with some anticipated momentum from this meeting to open up the school year with goals to kick off 23-24 school year. We have, what you received on Friday was 20 plus action steps that the team and I developed over the last few weeks. These goals are largely connected to our strategic planning goals. And we wanted to make sure there were some goals available for discussion this evening, because I think this will really help us land on some agreed upon goals for next school year. At the same time, I'm hoping, and I'm just going back to one of our discussions in the superintendent evaluation meeting, wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to talk about our workshop schedule for next year and give the feedback from the board to potentially identify some areas that we really want to hear about. And then we can also make sure that we kind of underline and highlighted those areas as well to make sure we're providing a deeper understanding for you in our workshop model. There's kind of a worksheet or a scorecard, if you will, in front of you. One is the pretty handout with our 3 students on South Street. It says Superintendent Proposed Goals. But then there's another handout, and at the top it says Goal Selection and Feedback Worksheet for the special ed meeting. The first page it says Teaching and Learning, and it looks something like this. And on the left-hand side of the document are the actual proposed goals for next school year. On the right-hand side of the document are really simply yes or no. This is a goal we should be focusing on in the superintendent goals for next year. And then underneath that, a yes or no if this is something you and respective board members would like to have a deeper conversation with at our workshops. So what I've asked the team and I to do is I will briefly go over all 6 goals. And then if you have any questions at any point, either myself or the team and I can provide some clarification so you clearly understand what we mean by some of the action steps of the proposed goals for this year. And so there are 6 strategic areas that we focus on: teaching and learning, staff development, school climate, meaningful collaboration and resource allocation. There are a number of action steps underneath there for proposed goals. Typically, we would not have this many as part of a superintendent goals package, and so the idea is try to provide a number of additional areas you'd like to perhaps discuss, and then through discussion, reduce this down to a more manageable number for 2024. Frankly, the team and I will be focusing on all of them, but for the superintendent goals, some will kind of sit inside the strategic plan regardless, but we want to make sure we extract the area you want us to focus on for the superintendent goals for this year. And then there's every expectation that we would share your feedback and any goals from my office with all of our departments across the district, and that will also play a role for the chiefs with the goal setting and school improvement plans from our schools as well. Just make sure we have a good alignment on all of this stuff. So, any questions about this kind of the activity itself? And then I will.
Did you want us to fill this out now?
No, I think it would be appropriate as we go through. I'll quickly brief you on the 6 areas. And as I'm going through, feel free to write your comments or some questions that you might have. And then we can go back and as we go along, it's like, oh, this is what I absolutely think we should focus on. Absolutely, that this should be a workshop. Check yes, so yes, and we'll just continue to go through the document. Then maybe we can just kind of review and talk about it. So, Ken, I understand you also have this on the board, for the board and the public as well, for your presentation. Sorry, I haven't turned around. And on page 1, it's goal 1 area, teaching and learning. And I will, if it's okay, I'll quickly walk you through the 4 proposed goals for next year. Develop articulated programs of study for all career pathways. And so there's considerable amount of work that needs to be done regarding curriculum development and creating kind of the pathways for the sequence of courses in every pathway for our 9 to 12 students. And so these are some discussions that certainly is going to impact our curriculum office, but also is going to directly impact our kids' experiences here at the high school. Frankly, I think that's kind of exciting, just kind of be a part of it. 1.2, engage Board of Ed and current DPS staff in deepening understanding of the national standards of practice necessary to make the academies of Danbury a national model. And so there's a criteria in place for the academy's model. If we're really doing this well, and of course our expectation is that we will be kind of given the ribbon as a national model. And so I understand this is not Nashville, Tennessee, but it is Danbury, Connecticut. And so regionally, we could potentially attract regionally some schools to our district to come watch Danbury in action, to get feedback from our board, to get feedback from our constituents in the city. But it's not until we've been selected as a national model and kind of given that ribbon, can we participate in that kind of, be on this side of the table, helping to guide other school districts. And so, just as an expectation, we would like to walk the board through, but also the constituents in the city, what it would take to get there. 1.3, train staff and implement the new ARC-4 K-3 reading program. I know our board members have been part of the curriculum committee. I've heard several presentations about this, and 23-24 will be a big year for implementing staff development. And last but not least, we'll go on, establish a collaborative team to reconceptualize and redesign middle school program and common experiences. And let me just explain, because there's not enough room to detail everything. As part of our proposal, and the board might recall, it's not only a new a new high school, but there's also carved out a building for middle school for 365 students. And so we need to come up with what the theme is going to be for that building, how kids are going to get there, and then whatever happens there, we need to talk about all 4 now of our middle schools and begin to really think through what this can mean for the entire city. And so the idea is, given that we have some opportunity here building this new middle school, which is part of the projection, talk about all of our middle schools to make sure, because what we don't want to have is West Side here, School of Danbury Career Academy, that site over here, 2 comprehensive schools here, and we have a middle school offering that's totally different across the city of Danbury. So we want to make sure there's some opportunity for all of us to discuss what this can look like for all 68 students. So I will pause there and see if there are any questions or feedback for us to provide some clarification. Bill?
You have, goal 1.3, K through 3, I understand it is supposed to be K through 5.
Yes, and that's just for year 1, just in terms of, it's really about capacity, trying to get to all the teachers at once, so it's K-3 now. And so if our kids in kindergarten, 1st or 2nd or 3rd grade, that staff will be trained now, and then we will get in front of 4 and 5 kids. Thank you.
Just a question on that. So we have the K to 5, are we looking to add up to 8 and then over? Oh, sorry. So I know we had, we were talking about the K to 5, and we had discussed it one time that we're looking to try to get that through the 8th grade. Are we looking to purchase that in the next budget, or is that considered at this point?
I think Kelly's going to help me. I think the reading program is just going to K-5, but there's something else in the works beyond that.
Yeah, so it'll be a 2-year rollout. First will be K-3 and then 4 and 5 after. One of the decision-making factors for this program is it does have the ability for an add-on at the middle school level. So as we continue to roll it out throughout the elementary, we will come back to the decision of middle school. And we did like this program because we do feel that we should be looking for a comprehensive K-8 program. So the short answer is, as we roll it out, that's going to be part of our decision-making in the future.
And that would told me it's not much, like 3,000 or 4,000 per grade or something, like, to extend it.
It is
the
not
same.
as expensive, I think that might be per classroom, but I'd have to look at the exact figures.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just add on, Michelle thinks that's the kind of question. We have found, and the chiefs, and Kelly, I mean, all of us, we have found that our kids often, they leave K-3, there's one program, but you go to 4 or 5, there's another program, you go to middle school, there's another program. And so, to your point, the question that you're asking, there's some potential here to have one program that our kids are experiencing. And so we don't have to unpack a new program and learn a new language, not to be confused with a written language, but a new language in terms of a program. So we can find that consistency for our kids and understand where to go. So I will, I don't see any more questions. I will go on to goal 2, but ask if you could just take a minute or two to write any comments or questions, and given the briefing, if you could also write yes or no in terms of if you feel like it should be a focus area for us or a workshop ideas.
So obviously all the things that are under each of these goals are important to our district. So from your standpoint, what criteria are you using to sort of suss out what the superintendent goals specifically should be?
Yeah, you could address that. So, and I don't want to downplay this in any way. I think, for example, 1.4, reconceptualizing middle school, all of them are important. I think this is the type of goal that you want us, I would think this is the one of the goals that are under goal 1 that you definitely want us to talk about. Because if my kid is going to middle school next year, I want to know what is going on. That's not to suggest that I want to know about 1, 2, 3, and 4. But I think it would be important for the board to be positioned to answer any questions or clarify any questions that might be out. So given that, that might be a good way for the board to help determine whether or not this is something worthy of workshop. And frankly, if it's really, really important to our families, I think it's going to be really, really important to you and more likely to be engaged and kind of connected to the presentation and ask a lot of questions. I would anticipate the middle school one, there's a lot of questions to start. So as an example, I think that's a good one. Again, not to suggest they're not all important, but the staff development, I don't know if the board wants to hear about how staff development is going, or maybe they do. That may not be number 1 for the board, given what I was just sharing about community impact.
I guess my follow-up would be, are you expecting that for the board choosing workshops, that we choose one associated with each set of goals?
So I'm thinking as we had put this lesson plan together, we're thinking if everyone at this table may pick, there may be some commonalities. And so we would report back. Overwhelmingly, this is what we heard, that the board, for the most part, wants to hear about middle school, right, reconceptualizing middle school. And so we will make sure one of the workshops next year focus on that. And under school climate, we see that the board really wants to see an update on the code of conduct and how the district is responding to the issues in our school community. And so we want to see an update on that. And if overwhelmingly that's what we see, then we will report back and then talk about kind of a cadence for our workshops, and kind of report back and ask if we have some. So going from the goals themselves, we'll report back and say this is what we put together, and then also look at workshops and then report back. And we won't take that and just put together a schedule. We will report back and see if the board is in agreement, and then we'll put a schedule together. That's really what I have.
But I just want to clarify, like ideally you're looking at one workshop per heading of goals, like one under.
Oh, I understand. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because, for example, I heard in one of our previous meetings, I want to hear more about the academies. And as we were looking at the work around the academies, one, we learned very quickly that the academy work It's pretty much found in almost every strategic area. But if primarily the board wants to hear feedback and updates on what's going on with the academy work in terms of preparation, it may not fit necessarily neatly in all of them, and that's okay. And if the board wants to hear mostly about, you know, Kevin, how are you and the team working toward our goal around code of conduct and addressing minor absenteeism across the district? You know, that those two focus areas alone might just be two goals. It may take up 3 or 4 meetings, as an example. And again, if it's important to the board, it also has significant impact in terms of folks asking you about clarifying questions, and we already know how important it is to the district. Because there's also, I think we need to have a discussion about, you know, we have the space for presentations. So once we get the feedback from the board around the workshops, then we can talk about, well, what do you want us to present out on? And so Caroline typically would come in and talk about data presentations, but we don't have to have her in the workshop model. We can have her as part of the data presentation. You know, we can kind of have a 10, 15-minute presentation about how we did last year, but we can keep on the workshop, which is good. So that's my long way of saying no. I don't think it has to be as streamlined as two from this area, two from this area.
So it's a board appetite.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
our goal.
so I think, not that this isn't great to go over, but I think the board needs to come up with a list of things that we want to see as far as, it doesn't have to be in the goals wherever it is, like the academy. The academy touches a bunch of these goals, like you said. So we want a presentation or a workshop on the academy. What's the structure? What's the organizational chart? What do we offer and stuff like that. If it's on security, so I think this is great as far as goals, but I think as far as workshops and where we're going to spend our time, I think we should come up with, the board should come up with a list independently of what is presented. If that makes sense, it's not.
Doesn't this follow the strategic plan? That's what, yeah, I mean, it's so rigid.
Yeah, but I'm saying,
It's so rigid, yeah.
no, goals are goals.
Right.
And we're working on those all year long. These are something that Kevin works on. We get one at every meeting, the presentation update on. But I think the workshop model was to really, it didn't work really that well. Yeah, now, because there's a lot going on. But I think it's to drill down on specific topics that the board as a whole would like to focus on. That's kind of what you're trying to, you're getting to that point by asking these questions. And so.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't mean to interrupt, sorry. I think I'm looking at it from a standpoint of like, you know, if I'm putting, you want me to put comments down on here so that if you have a goal listed that sort of touches on something that I think we could use a workshop, maybe like put down, here's the broader suggestion for what we think the workshop is going to be, or like a more specific.
Absolutely.
I mean, from my perspective, this is not a bad thing to come off from because it is aligned with the strategic goals, and I think our work as a board should also be aligned with that. But I was thinking exactly what you were thinking during this conversation, which is that I want to make sure that we're being a little bit organic in our process as well, coming to you with specific requests.
So what happens to that?
Right. So, well, there are two goals that have a put on board for this evening. And that's one about preparing goals for 23-24. And as part of that conversation, also help us land on potentially create an outline for workshops. So I think there's still some opportunity here in reviewing the proposed goals for next year, getting feedback from the board on which one we can focus on for 23-24. So we're not waiting until November and January to approve it like we had previously.
Yeah, I just have a question, Mr. Morrison, are you anticipating us to complete this tonight and have this document already?
So we can do it a couple of different ways. We were hoping to go through this evening and get feedback on after the presentation as we're going through, that our members would check, Yes, this is something I'm interested in learning more about. Yes, this is something I'd like to focus on for next year. And then we will provide that feedback for you in another meeting. So to see if we can get closer to the agreed upon goals for 23-24. If that's too much to ask, that's also okay. But either way, we just wanted to present some kind of goals for 23-24.
I truly understand, the presentation, and I also understand that there's comments to each one of these. And, some of the comments, it might take a while to put together, to read them and look at them and put them together. To me, it's just like, I'm not comfortable from doing this and saying yes, no, yes, no. And then on that, we have 3 board members and I'm even here. So, and to have an overall discussion, and I know that's not your fault, but, I'm just more comfortable with some time, that I can look at this and prepare myself and prepare an answer, that I'm comfortable with, and that's gonna continue to help, lead our district, forward, and be a part of the goals, to, continue doing, moving our, educational system forward. I'm just not, and maybe it's just me today, I'm just not into the, groove of just putting all this together and saying yes, no. That's just me.
Ms. Watson, are you looking for mandatory comments on this particular paper?
I'm sorry, what kind of comments?
Are you looking for mandatory comments? I mean, you're gonna choose fill it out yes or no, or?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think we continue on with the goals, the presentation of the goals, and then maybe we circle back to have people can digest the sheet, and maybe we could also come up with a list, kind of a list of what, to your point, workshops we want to see going forward. I don't think we're gonna accomplish that all tonight, but we'll see how far we get.
Okay. And so goal 2 is staff development, and these two, 2.1, develop a comprehensive plan that prioritizes timely, relevant professional learning sessions for school leaders to enhance their skills and performance. I'm sorry, let me do 2 points. Structure systems to coordinate scheduling high-quality professional development to address the learning needs of all staff and ensure dedicated learning time is allocated to strategic priority areas. And so, there is a need for us to revisit the availability of staff to meet together. And it's gonna require us to get really creative, and I'm gonna ask Anna just to speak to this and just kind of unpack 2.1 and 2.2 for the board.
Good evening. These goals for goal area 2 staff development center around systems construction. So what we wanted to do in terms of looking at the data throughout the course of the year, both from the lens of disciplinary, academic, attendance, we're going to carve out that structure so that we can have more frequent meetings in terms of principals, assistant principals, curriculum administrators, department leaders, that we're all on the same page and providing that sort of prioritizing time so that we can meet, we know these goals and looking at our system as we focus on data. But also, we're looking to provide, to build the capacity of everyone within the organization to operationalize our goals. To do that, we've got to look at the current gap between where we are and where we need to go. So I look at this in multiple ways, prioritizing professional learning for everyone, from board level, superintendent level, cabinet level, principal, all administrators, because if we're all informed about what's going on, admin council, principal PLCs, staff after school on Tuesdays, they're carving out that structure which will require some cadre subs, so some additional subs, some support during the course of the school day, to pull teachers to have our professional learning communities with principals and with the teachers. Tuesday after school to have our data collaborative meetings, to have our PBIS meetings, to have our school improvement plan reviews, to have our core K-3, to look at the illustrative math, grades 4 through 5, the new implementation of our math program. But this is going to be an ongoing process grounded in inquiry, but also involved in this or instructional rounds. So it's creating that overall professional learning system, which is interwoven across everybody in this room and all departments within the district. So it's going to be a lift in terms of cadre subs, number one, and also providing or creating that space to meet both during the school day and outside the school day.
One of the things in terms of structures that most of the items that you see listed in the areas have an impact on professional learning. So everything you see listed in teaching and learning has some impact on professional learning. All of the things that you have. Can you hear? It's a motorcycle. So in all of the areas that you see listed, almost all of the areas that you see listed as goals for the superintendents, here have an impact on staff development. So if you go back and look at teaching and learning and you see each of those items that are listed there, they all have a professional learning component to them. And when you get to those you see a component of professional learning in each of those. So it's really critical that we create a structure that doesn't overwhelm teachers in trying to learn new things, but we're able to roll it out in a way that makes sense, allows them to process the information and then implement the programming as we roll it out. You see the ARC core program, which refers to that. That's going to be a heavy lift in terms of staff development, just understanding conceptual knowledge behind it, but also the implementation of it. And that goes to each of the goal areas. You'll see a heavy impact on professional learning. So it's really good to just create a structure in which departments are not competing against building initiatives as well.
Do you plan for the year, what these sessions are going to be, or is it hit and miss?
Yes, there is considerable, good question, there's considerable planning around the work. Chris and Annie, gonna give them a taste of what that looks like, sounds like.
Yes. So for example, last week we met with Dr. Casamaro's and started to roll out what are going to be the critical areas that are going to really take the most time for people in their professional learning, and how do we work a schedule around that so that everything is not competing against one or the other thing. A piece of that K-3 rollout is that grades 4 and 5 are rolling out a new math program next year, or continuing the math program that's been in K-3. So a lot of their professional learning for the grade 4 or 5 teachers is going to be taken up with the illustrative math training and professional learning. So we're rolling out the literacy piece so there's not competing priorities there. We're also looking to speak a little bit more about the BIS system. That's going to take a lot of time and energy as well. And then each building will also identify priorities that they need to work on over the course of the year based on what they know about their students and their data. So we do work together to make sure that we're not overwhelming teachers, but giving them a thoughtful approach to each of the things that we're going on.
Any other questions on goals here?
I just wanted to say, after reading the survey that was taken this year, there seemed to be teachers, faculty didn't seem to express that they got enough professional learning sessions. And I was just wondering if something gets published so they know this is what's happening, and to address their concerns, because I was kind of surprised because there always seemed to be teachers had, professional days during the school year. And that's why I was asking if it's an established calendar.
Yes, Chris, I'll go first. the team and I, we did look at this feedback. And frankly, concerned about the feedback. It's not a lack of planning and having a PD calendar out for the entire school year. We might have being around our team that we have a better plan out. But I think some of the things that we've gotten away from, and we talked about this just as recently as last week, as you know, there's something to be said about having someone from the district office or the CRC office go in and leading professional development, but also making sure there's opportunities for some of our lead teachers and master teachers and giving folks an opportunity to hear from their peers, also leading professional development. So I think it's important for the district, for us, to be more intentional about putting their peers in front of them, and then not only just hearing it from the experts at some of the respective district offices. So we just talked about this last week and finding ways to do that. With this opportunity, I think it will be a little bit better received by our staff. That's only one strategy, but I think we need to be more intentional about things like that. Because I think what's happening is that there's this kind of top down to PD that folks are not appreciating, that we really need to be a little bit more reflective about. Chris?
I was just gonna say, a lot of the learning stuff from our instructional rounds, particularly in the middle school where 6, 7, 8, grade 6 in particular, the 3 middle schools worked across the various schools to look at math pedagogy specifically. And I think organically that came out that they want to have an opportunity to watch other teachers, to look at practice in other classrooms. I think the only way to really increase your own efficacy in terms of practice in the classroom is to see master teachers teaching. It's one thing to hear about it, it's one thing for a presenter to say what great math instruction is. And part of our instructional rounds this year, but also will be a strategic focus next year, is getting into classrooms where we see such outstanding practice that it would be negligent on our part not to have that pedagogy inform the rest of our school district. We're doing such wonderful things we all need to learn from. There's classrooms we go in, I just take notes, I can do it for hours, because we all should be taught as students at that level. So really highlighting, showcasing, and also learning from, and having those individuals, as Mr. Wilson said, come in and provide professional learning opportunities, both at the teacher level and the principal level. Another important part of professional learning is being timely and relevant. So we know in the past couple of years, behavior has been an issue. Partnering with our school psychologists, partnering with mentorship our PBIS teams to really put an intensive plan in place with the code of conduct to support everyone in the school district. And it's not necessarily that everybody wants to do a great job in the classroom. Sometimes we don't have the repertoire, or have not had certain experiences that we need to develop and we need to improve upon in order to really, actualize our abilities.
So for goal 3, talent acquisition, recruit, employ, retain the workforce that embodies and embraces diversity and best supports the educational needs of our students. So we have 3 goals for next year. Continue to advance marketing and recruitment and build upon the success that we had this year. 3.2, enhance communication and education about employee benefits to inform staff about the added value of working for DPS. And 3.3, establish a committee to identify best practices and develop partnerships with new teaching programs to attract and retain a more diverse teaching corps. Can you talk about 3.1 to start with? Maybe the other 2 are speak for themselves, but any questions about those?
First I can technologically look at that's all right, okay. So we're gonna focus on a couple of things. You'll remember from last year, we talked a lot about recruiting and retaining talent, and that continues to be a primary focus of the group. And so each of these goal areas are gonna roll out in slightly different ways. The first one with regard to marketing and recruitment, one of the challenges we continue to face is the depth of talent pool, both among certified and non-certified staff. So we continue to look at places where we're going to market and to be more aggressive in how we attract
candidates into the district. We're looking also at incentives, so we tried that a little bit with paraeducators this year, but we're looking at alternatives to incentives. And this leads a little bit into retention. We've done a couple of things this year that we'd like to leverage for next year as well. For example, ARCTEL. So ARCTEL is a program where our existing teachers can go through a program to get cross-endorsed into bilingual TESOL education. And we have provided a way for them to enter the program, and we pay a modest amount of tuition for them. And those teachers come out having a commitment to us of at least 2 years remaining in the district, and they help to fill a shortage area. So we're gonna continue to look at opportunities to continue to build on those. There's sort of small financial cost to us, but very large rewards in shortage areas. So partnering with different departments to do that. That's one big area. A second big area in terms of how we recognize and recruit folks is going to be the how we roll out the structure of the career academies. So we're about to enter into some negotiations with DSAA about the structure and with NAA about the structure for teachers. And those contemplate kind of a breadth of responsibility and training, but also recognizing some criteria or some certifications in specialty areas that, again, we want to recognize teachers who've got something that's a little bit unique that they bring to the academies in their chosen area of study that will allow us to retain and reward and retain those members of our faculty. So those are two big areas. The last primary area is going to be continuing our march through this inquiry into DEI, and is our workforce continuing to reflect the demographics of our students. One of the places you might remember that we talked a little bit about last year as a goal for coming years was to look at where candidates of color have fallen out of our hiring pipeline. So the third area of initiative for us is going to be to try to gather data as best we can of where we're bringing in candidates, and then where is it in the screening, in the interviewing, in the selection, where in the process are candidates falling out of the funnel. And so one of the recommendations for goals will be to put together a study group that can look a little bit more in more detail about where candidates fall out, and then look at things like how can we make our selection process more continuous across all of our buildings. You'll remember that our hiring is all decentralized, so building administrators, they're the laboring more on how to hire into our buildings. And we think that there's some really great practices in some buildings that we could replicate in other buildings and get a little bit better result in terms of equity in hiring. So those are kind of the main initiatives that we're going to have for this year. And if I could make a plug in for volunteers to interview on Wednesday.
So Kim, quick question. So I noticed the retiree list from last week seemed to be around the same we kind of get every year, right?
Yep.
Have we seen this year more people leaving the district for other jobs or any more than on average?
No, it feels anecdotally so, but when we looked at the numbers, it really isn't extremely so. We're only end of June. We'll get another kind of flood of resignations or retirements in the coming months, so I'll be able to look at that a little bit better. Sometimes you always hear me kind of rain on the Tyler parade, but one of the great things about Tyler is they run a retention report so that we can see how many people are staying and how many are going. The retirees we saw a really big burst right around COVID. So a lot of people that maybe were close went right over the top and retired. What we are seeing though in our exit survey, which we started running this year, is a lot of people are leaving the profession of teaching. They're not necessarily leaving us to go somewhere else to teach. And that's some of the data that we saw when we did the exit survey.
How much of the hiring that we're doing is replacing open spots that we have, and how much of that is new positions that we're creating?
We only added, I want to say it was 13 or 14 new positions, mostly at the high school, because again, we're anticipating the big surge when we get ready to open the academies and kind of enrollment bump between now and then. So at all other levels, really it was replacing, we collapsed some sections of the elementary school again this year. But it's really us at the higher levels in the high school, where the lion's share of this.
Okay.
Can you just remind us how many open positions we currently have right now? And if you could, I don't know, obviously, you mentioned a little.
Yeah.
But if you have a sense of how many of those are full-time teaching versus other positions?
Right, so, well, I actually keep a document in real time, so I'm pausing not so much because I'm off guard, because it's changing minute by minute. So I have a really low-tech Google spreadsheet, more or less, that looks like, the old whiteboard that I used to have in my office. I would say, some buildings, elementary, we're done, I mean, we're in really good shape. The high school have quite a bit of hiring to do this year, so we're still kind of making our way through specialists. They're working hard, but again, we're getting people, we're having trouble bringing people in because of the shortage area. Non-certified paras, we still have we have at least 40 to go. We're gonna go to, there's a paraeducator fair next week?
Tomorrow night.
Oh, tomorrow, there we go. Kelly's team is gonna go, there's some members of our team are gonna go. We're trying to kind of glom onto every opportunity we can find for those non-certified staff members, those are the ones that really are causing the most agita right now for us. But I would say we've probably got, I've got another 30, 40 positions to go, probably out of the level, so, teaching.
Thank you.
Michelle?
So when we had the visitors from Nashville last week, we talked a lot about, in one of our breakout sessions, about support and how much it was going to require for the career academies. There was a lot of coaches that were brought up. And I had spoken with Michelle from Brittany about getting a model. I guess they have an actual flow chart of how they support the student. I'm assuming that it's different than what we currently have, and I'm wondering how, do we have the same kind of numbers? I know that things are going to shift. Can we get that diagram with that flow chart on it, just to get a better understanding of, how many people it will require to, that touches the student in this new program?
Yes, that's probably a Karen Casimiro question more than a Kim question.
I think Jen might
Yeah, I'm just sitting here.
Sorry.
But I will say this, that, in talking about how we formulate the administrator structure, that's the one that's kind of right in the front of our minds right now. That's the one that we'll start talking now with, DSAA about. That will look comparable to what they use in Nashville, with academy leaders / directors / principals, whatever the name is. And so we have some real structure work to do in negotiations, because that's a mandatory subject of bargaining for us, about the titles, the pay lane, the number of days of the year, reporting responsibilities, and how they're hired, what the selection process will be. Once we settle that, we'll have the overarching structure, and then we'll layer in teaching and changes that may have to happen for teacher assignments, and again, how it impacts the bargaining unit. But I think with those, you'll see that it probably is fairly consistent from place to place. You need to have your core teachers, you need to have your coaches, you need to have your support staff, you need to have your PPS staff. So it probably will look pretty comparable. I think the big thing that I heard was class size or cluster size. They're considerably smaller than what we've done here, or even at.
Just having spoken with them, they just seem to have a lot of teams that supported one student at many different levels. There was a lot of, it seemed like a lot of touching that student, and so it just seemed like, because I had asked that question, how do we handle it? She goes, we have a lot of gaps that we need to fill in. So I wanted to see what we currently have, as far as what we usually have now set up as a system to, support our student. And then this new model, it definitely does change, so I just wanted to get an idea for, obviously we're talking about budget and, coming down the line, we know that we've committed, obviously, to the Career Academy, but what does that really look like when we're looking at the numbers and we're looking at positions? Because we don't want a similar situation to occur. Obviously, this is going to be a big lift. So just wondering if we could start to get an idea of what it looks like, and obviously it's going to develop and take its own life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions on the vote?
I guess mine is less of a question and more of a comment, which is that I wonder if there's a way to have a conversation with city officials to see how they can incentivize teachers who are not currently part of our community to become part of our community. I know that this has been discussed once or twice before, but the idea that if a developer comes into our community, that some of the housing that, comes out of that development is dedicated to providing housing for first-year teachers, something similar to that. That might be a really beneficial way for the city to, have to worry about spending capital rather than use, an asset that could help us resolve some of these staffing issues.
And to capitalize on that, Kate, there are, because of our status as a priority district, there are lots of things that flow from that, like, student loan refinancing rates through Tesla are considerably lower for our teachers. At one time, the preferential mortgage rates also were considerably lower than the travel center and within city limits. But I agree, I think California uses a model very similar to what you're talking about, but doesn't mean in certain areas as teacher housing and pricing for that.
And Kate, I will fold what you just mentioned in the 3.2 plus the 3.1. And if it's Shelter, the question that you asked, we'd be happy to open up the year, the structure related to all of these breakout sessions. I think the board was particularly interested in learning more about what that means for Danbury. So we'd be happy to put together a crosswalk and where we are now. This is the natural model, and this is kind of what it would look like here in Danbury. Because we need to start having those discussions quickly. Goal area 4, school climate. Promote a safe and supportive learning environment that nurtures social emotional growth and the civic responsibilities for all students, families, and staff. So we have 4 proposed goals for next year: district-wide implementation of the code of conduct and parental notification system. This is following up to the discussion we had previously this school year. Implement training and systems for PBIS across all schools, pre-K-8, to deepen understanding and establish structural material and supports. This would be a goal of year 1 to 3. 4.3, train staff and implement aperture, SEL screener and data assessment to identify and support student needs to enhance their readiness for learning. 4.4, continue to implement strategies to create awareness of the importance of attendance and address chronic absenteeism in most schools. And last but not least, implement a comprehensive system of emergency school management. And this is a follow-up to some of the priorities we had outlined that included leveraging our grant monies for that. Like see what that presented out. So I don't know if there are any questions. I know Chris and Anna had talked about the code of conduct. The parent notification system is a question that the board that was in this room had asked about. Meaning previously, our kids and families that signed up on it. We will update that and use Parent Square to do something similar. You also heard Chris and Anna present out on the code of conduct and the direction we're trying to head into next year, which kind of requires some more training of staff in that regard. The PBIS, Chris, Anna, and Kelly had provided an update to the board at our last meeting. This is going to be really important for us as we talk about expectations of students in all schools. But really, we were tier 1 kind of positive model versus catching students when they do something bad. It's more about highlighting students when they do something good. We're creating an environment where everyone's trying to focus on doing something good for the school. The aperture, the SEL screener, that probably requires some explaining how to give the board some background on that.
Absolutely. This is something that is being sponsored by the State Department of Education. And what it does is it gives teachers the ability to rate and screen all students in their classroom. And what it's looking for is strengths or assets that students have as far as coping and readiness for learning. And then identify any areas that students are lacking those skills that need to be explicitly taught. So this is not a means of identifying any negative or bad behavior. It's really looking at it from a very proactive approach of what skills are lacking. Maybe a student is not able to work successfully in a group. So what do we need to do and explicitly teach that child so that they can achieve that with success? So every teacher will do a quick rating or screening of, it depends on the grade grade level, but anywhere between about 10 and 14 questions on a student. And then if there are identified areas of need, there is a more extensive grading scale that can be completed by a team of teachers. And really the rationale for doing this is so that we can identify specific areas of support that we can then explicitly teach students so that they make positive gains in growth, which ultimately impacts their success in school. And so children will be rated fall, winter, and spring. So it'll be the first time we'll actually have a measurement tool to see growth across those SEL skills, which will be really neat. And we'll also be using this in conjunction with our PBIS, our positive behavior supports, system-wide structures in schools for successful learning for students, so they understand how to go about doing school. And we'll also be partnering this with our absenteeism data to see if a student is lacking, is that one of the reasons that maybe they're avoiding or not coming to school? And so how do we shore up those skills? So they're all kind of working in conjunction with one another to ultimately support students in attending school, feeling safe and secure at school, and wanting to learn at school.
Thanks, Bill.
We were talking a few months back about some sort of reward system for people who, for classes, had good attendance. Is there anything on the docket, something like that?
Yes, so Chris and you guys speak to this and talk about how PBS falls on the connection to PBS.
So yes, that would be something that would be on the docket for next year, PBIS, or incentivizing A, coming to school, B, being attentive, C, behaving, on the systems and structure inherent to the schools themselves, and incentivizing it class-wide, school-wide, looking at each school. We always do deep dive into the respective schools and their overall attendance level, but rewarding like perfect attendance and those sort of certificates in the past, I think, we've talked a lot about bringing that back, and that likely will be, starting next year, because it's important, kids get excited about it, it's something that we can do, and it would cause us to gain into the attendance.
Thank you. Any other questions? School plan? Yes.
So I just want to go back to that aperture screening real quick. You shared that teachers are conducting this 3 times a year for each of their students. And we talked about that at the elementary level, the core teacher would be handling that assessment. Once you go towards middle school and high school, how is that decision being made about who conducting the assessment?
Sure, so we will be doing that in conjunction with the building principals and picking one core content teacher that can complete that for every student. And then remember, if there are identified areas of need that the student needs to look, we need to look further at a student, then we can have a group of teachers collectively complete that, because we know that particularly when students change classes, they may present differently in one class to another. Sometimes that's based on teacher expectations, sometimes that's based on confidence in the content area. So the initial screening will be done by the rule is who knows the child best. So if there is a relationship with that child, that teacher would be most appropriate to do so. If it's a teacher that has a student maybe for one of their flex classes on a regular basis or something like that. But we will pick one of the core content area teachers to not overburden any teacher. Most of our middle school and high school teachers have 120 students on their caseload. So it may be that we pick block 1 and say every teacher that has a child in block 1 is only completed to, and then as there's needs that rise to the top, we can then look across a wider variety of teachers to make sure that we're appropriately identifying the areas of need.
Thank you. I wonder if it would be possible to get a copy of the questionnaire, just actually use the questions that we can ask. Is that something that we share with the board?
I will ask if I can give a full copy, and it's copyrighted, so I haven't asked that, but I can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you.
The data we'll be able to share out in aggregate with the board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
I know that USAPC does the NEMP, and over the last year or so, as we did various things, and I'm thinking, since I'm a grandma, some of our young kids starting in elementary school, and I don't want to call a person a mentor, maybe it's a grandma. And I don't know how you work this into, once the student, their behavior change, we can match that student up with the grandma or grandpa. And say, okay, he's gonna work with you for a couple of weeks to maybe change their attitude. And I think we have to start in the elementary school, because from what I'm saying, by the time you get to the high school, we don't have people really mentoring our high school students. And some of them need to be mentored. And I was just thinking about that, you can call it grandma, grandpa, whatever you want. But, and I know, when we came up, there was a different version as to how you respect people and how you talk back to people and what you do not do when you're not at home, So, it's just something that I've been thinking about a long time. I don't know if something were implemented soon, you will have to have other people come in, but then how would you go to get these people to sign up? So first thing, Johnny has to be there. When you sign Johnny with someone.
And if I could just, the purpose of this is not always to wait to that point, right, where Johnny is acting or behaving badly. It's to recognize that there's some warning signs or flags so we can intervene before he's completely disengaged or misbehaving and things like that. One of the strategies we currently use is mentors with DSABC. We also identify mentors in the school. There are, check-in, check-out systems that are used regularly, so there's that trusted adult. There's reward systems for students with trusted adults, but we're always in need of more. So I like that idea. It's something we're currently doing, but certainly could expand upon that. But the notion of this is really to be very proactive so that we can put some skills into place before we get to the point that we're really trying to have to remedy a negative situation.
Teresa?
Just wondering, can the board offer $100 for perfect attendance?
I'll take 100 to make every meeting.
We definitely can come up with some type of celebration of student for attendance. And perhaps, there are CAVE awards, there are superintendent awards, there are principal awards. And maybe it would be appropriate that we start celebrating students and finding a cycle to celebrate students for our own awards, things that are important for the board, and finding ways to celebrate and how we work with the board meetings, I don't know, but I think all of our schools, our teachers, and more importantly, our kids and families really appreciate it. Goal 5, meaningful collaboration. Partner with families, communities, and public and private sectors to foster vested interest in schools and collectively create opportunities for deeper engagement with student learning and success. And so we have 4 proposed goals for next year. Strategically leverage community partnerships to support student achievement and through a collective impact initiative. 5.2, reestablish a robust adult education program of seminars, classes open to the public, i.e. ESL, high school, diploma completion, citizenship, and an array of programs requested by the community. And so, when we talk about adult ed, we're also talking about continuing education programs. 5.3, expand family university programs to include Saturday Explore and Learn, New Promise, and champion programs to celebrate families who attend. 5.4, and the last one, roll out grade level community curriculum through training sessions and school-based open houses to increase student academic achievement. And so 5.1, I know the collective impact model has been talked about briefly. Julie, Bridget, with different agencies, were part of the collective impact meetings, and most recently Michelle was part of the one or two meetings. But Anna, if you can just kind of give a very brief overview of collective impact, kind of intentionality behind the collective impact, and some things we would focus on. And I think it's also important that the board understand that it's not our collective impact. However, we do play a role in kind of getting it off the ground. Once it's off the ground and training wheels are off, it's our teenagers can go on and do their own thing and get pushed.
Thank you. So the collective impact, was in response to a request for proposal that the Nellie Mae Foundation, put out about almost 2 years ago now. And so we put in for a community-driven, all moving in one direction as a city around certain goals that impact students and their families. And so through the meetings that we've had so far, we have come up with 3 main goals, or pillars as we call them, or goalposts, is to reduce absenteeism, increase mental health, and support early childhood education. And that was from surveys that we have had done over the last few years in putting this grant in and through our different other surveys that we've done. Reducing absenteeism is something that the district will benefit from, but families will benefit from that too, because there's root causes to absenteeism that we know that food, housing, just security for students impacts their ability to be at school. So it's not just a school issue, but it's a community issue. And so where we are to date right now on this collective impact is we have a community group. We now have the start of the three work groups, and we have just put up an ad with our backbone agency, United Way, for its first executive director. And so that's where we are so far.
Thank you. 5.2 is, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to comment on the recent survey. Positive impact for areas like you with families. Thank you.
Thank you. Reestablish a robust adult education program, and can you speak to that a little bit and continue that initiative?
Sure. We're very excited that we've onboarded a new director with Lucy, who is moving out there working in the community, establishing community partnerships among neighborhood businesses, local businesses in the Denver area. The state has told us that we have currently in our community about 15,000 people over the age of 18 who do not hold high school diplomas. So our program is currently undersubscribed, and Rick is working very hard to bring that enrollment up in all of our programs, and we engage students in programs that are being offered. There's a wide range of programs that are being offered currently, but we definitely do not have the enrollment that we need given the community that we serve, between the community and our 7 partner districts. So Rick has been out working in the community, bringing in business partners and meeting with local business owners, thinking about ways that we can engage their employees that did not have a high school diploma, that may need ESL classes to further their language development, and get adults into those adult educated programs, and then eventually into those high school graduation programs. Rick has also partnered with Anne through a program to bring ESL and how many students are you serving?
As of right now, I think we've got about 50 that are about ready to graduate tomorrow.
And also looking out for 2 new cycles of parents coming in. Looking at ways that we can engage our preschool parents in the future and marry if they do not hold high school diplomas. But one of the other pieces that Rick is hopeful to roll out in the spring is the continuing ed program. Many years ago, it used to be a very robust program. We offered a lot of adult ed programs like Spanish for teachers, yoga classes, all of those kinds of things, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside. So Rick is really making a commitment to reinvigorating that program, and he's very excited about it. We're very excited about what he's bringing to the program and to the community as well. So we're hoping to see that roll out this spring.
Thank you. So, given the board's experience with the Family program at Family University, grade level curriculum is kind of an extension or a connection to our literacy and numeracy nights and finding a better way to connect that to Anne's office. And that's kind of 5.4. Are there any questions about the collaboration, the pipeline questions? Okay. And the last area, goal 6, is resource allocation. Establish a transparent, coherent, and efficient budget process that ensures equitable distribution of resources allocated to support and sustain the district vision and mission. 6.1, co-construct a standalone budget for the Danbury Career Academy. 6.2, identify specific workforce development funds in partnership with the city that can be utilized to fund Danbury Career Academy program. 6.3, develop a multi-year financial outlook to improve capacity for long-term planning. And 6.4, conduct efficiency studies of people transportation and shared services to identify cost-saving opportunities. So those are the 4 areas that we prioritize for next year. The idea of co-construction, standalone budget. Some of the board members might recall at our city council meeting, there was a request to have ongoing discussions with the board around our budget development for next year, specifically to the Academy of Danbury Work. And so our idea was, of course, any budget is also going to include our high school, but we want to make sure that we itemize specifically the work of the high school and do that with the city of Danbury and any other constituents who need to be at the table to make sure there's clear understanding of what the needs are. And then obviously put the 2 budgets together so the request can be fully understood and comprehended by the school. The workforce development funds, and so there are grants out there to help support initiatives that are in workforce needs around regionally, but also around the state of Connecticut. And so the hope is that given the mayor's office focus with increasing their capacity in grant office, is that we can work with them for some grants that can also support our students, but at the same time collectively support the needs of the city in our region. I think the multi-year financial outlook to improve capacity for long-term planning is somewhat self-explanatory, but I think at the minimum, we need to put together a 3-year financial outlook for the board and for the city of Danbury. And last but not least, conduct efficiency studies. Certainly transportation is one of them, but given that we are talking about adding a high school, adding a middle school, in addition to the challenges that we already have, we're going to try to find every efficiency possible that we can find. So we think it's important that we have some type of study conducted to see if there's opportunity for savings down the road. So I will pause and see if there are any questions on goal 6 before we turn over to the next area.
6-1. I guess my question is, you gonna, when we start the budget process, you're gonna do a budget just strictly for the Career Academy.
So thank you for asking a question that way too. I think it's important that we have a budget for the entire system, but I think it needs to be itemized in a way so everyone can clearly understand this is specifically for the Academy of Danbury. And just make sure everyone understands that it's part of the entire budget. But specifically for the high school, this is the cost associated with that building.
So with the finance director and yourself and other people, so I'm trying to envision this maybe a year from there or next year sometime. It would just be a book strictly for Career Academy, and you can look in there and all the numbers and what you need for the Career Academy stuff to be in that book. And it's not going to be merged with our regular budget.
So I think we're envisioning, it would be merged, however, we would bring specific attention, so if it's in the book as an example, but we will bring attention to the high school piece of the budget and say, this specifically, this page, and so we have $160 million budget next year. And so 25 million hypothetically could be Danbury High School, both campuses, right? And we would have that itemized in a way where when you go to page 37 in the book, between page 37 and 45, that's itemized all the costs associated with the high school and the costs that we're projecting this year, next year, year after, it's kind of 3-year outlook. Sorry.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anything else on goal 6?
Yes, so given the feedback this evening, I can follow up with the board chair regarding the goals themselves on how we want to move forward on the feedback from this. And we will table that for now, but I think just kind of given the overview that was provided this evening, I hope this helps us land on goals to help kick off the year versus kind of the late start that we have in November. So I appreciate your engagement this evening and request also that they can have for my agenda item. So I want to take this opportunity, I'll run it in a second. Also take this opportunity while I have the board's attention and see if Kevin is here as well. We had an article released this weekend about overcrowding at the high school. And in the article, it spoke to, frankly, your superintendent spoke prematurely about what was happening at overcrowding at the high school and how that was potentially being addressed. The reality is, and I just want to walk the board through the timeline. In January, late January of 2023, I requested a meeting with the mayor to really speak about my concerns about really the safety of the building, given the projections for 24-25 in light of the news that the new building will not be built. And so the meeting was, I don't want to say productive, but it was certainly a good meeting in that City Hall certainly understood our concerns. We have typically 900 plus students in the cafeteria at any given time during the school day. And a building that was essentially made for 3,000 or maybe 2,800 will be close to 3,800 by the time 24-25 comes. And so in January, we had that meeting really without any answers beyond January 24th. I was reminded this weekend, and this is my mistake, because I thought Ralph was actually at the table with the city officials reminded me it was actually Rachel who was at the table, and that was really at that time just a conversation on how are we going to handle 24-25. We need some help in light of the overcrowding challenges that we have, not being able to open up the building. Between the end of January and the end of February, I received a call from Dr. Stephen Chang, who is the president of the University of Business Colleges here in the state of Connecticut. And he had a call, I never spoke to Dr. Chang before, and he made me aware that a legislator in our community, a name that did not resonate with me, because of the names that's typically had shared the challenges around overcrowding here in the community, and that perhaps there could be a solution right here in town at Westcon. And so there was a meeting in February to see if there was any potential. And so I told him I appreciated the outreach, and certainly a meeting would be appropriate. Paul Barron, the president at Westcon, I called him immediately. I said, Paul, I don't know who Stephen Chang is, but he just called me and said we should meet. So Paul said, let's do it, and you never know. So we had what I'm calling an exploratory meeting to see if there was a fit. So what we learned at that meeting is that West Con is being challenged with declining enrollment, while Danbury Public Schools is continuing to experience increased enrollment. And so what I noticed quickly is that Dr. Chang was trying to bring us together to see if there was some opportunity here. And so I then asked, well, can we also bring the mayor's office, because we had just met with him in January, and frankly, if this thing's going to be funded, it happens to be the mayor, because I can pay for whatever this thing might cost. And so at that meeting, it was mostly Paul and Missy Alexander, who took the provost, and you know, really just listened, just trying to understand what our needs were. So it was us, it was the mayor's office, but mostly us, because they were asking us logistically, what would you need, what would you need, what would you need, if. And really the ask was, just tell us how many classrooms you would need if this would work, how many bathrooms you would need if this would work, how many offices you would need. And we said to them, which is part of what you probably read in the paper this weekend, this really could only work if we could move an academy over, because there would be no cost, there would be no efficiencies found outside of that. So that meeting was in February, and it was come back, send us some information, and you know, we can follow up. That follow-up meeting, what really was an exploratory meeting just to see if there's a match here, was not scheduled until today. And so, and again, given that this meeting, so the person who scheduled the meeting is Dr. Chang, and trying to get all the calendars lined up. Again, this is not for the 23-24 school year, this is for the 24-25 school year. What has not changed from January until June is that there's, and I'll go and brief the board on the meeting today, but there's no earmarked money for any of these initiatives. And so we were immediately told today, and not very different from when we had a school in Brookfield during the 21-22 school year, and immediately we had to provide upgrades to the entire facility to make it ready for kindergarten. We learned from the university, well, it's not K-12 ready, and we need to make you aware. These are things that we learned today in the meeting. You're probably looking at north of $300,000 just to walk in the building, because it's not ready for K-12 students. It's a different standard. Again, while we're just talking about our basic needs in this meeting, there is no answer for transportation, which can cost anywhere from a couple of $100,000 to close to $1 million, $600,000-$700,000 for 50 kids, because to add potentially 30, 40 new buses to our lineup. We have never costed anything out in terms of staffing, additional costs or union meetings, and labor impact, because at this point it was really exploratory. And so we're in this meeting, this at 12:30 today. And so I get there, and of course, I have the president of local and state colleges in the meeting, and of course they saw the same article that you did. And so I have to say out loud that prematurely I'm talking to the media about something, frankly, that was in the very early exploratory stages, and should not have, right? So let me just talk a little bit. And then secondly, and this is frankly part of a lot of things that I'm trying to do on behalf of the district, and in January and February, I really didn't have anything to bring to the board in terms of anything needy to bring to your attention. But I also understand that there should have been a place where I am updating you on some discussions that may or may not crystallize into anything meaningful for the district. So I want to make the board aware that we did have these discussions. There was a discussion today, and so there must have been 15 plus people on the call. Folks from the construction authority at the state of Connecticut, folks from, and they were really representing the state education department. The mayor's office was on the call. Judy Kushner was on the call. The president of West Con was on the call, a couple of his assistants, and then Kara, who's in Philadelphia, and Dan Donovan was on the call for the technical questions that would come up. And so we had sent the number of classrooms, the number of offices, the number of restrooms that would be needed, clarified that we would need at least 30, 40, 50 buses to move students. It really depends on the timing, but we made it clear that we would need to move students from the entire city of Danbury, Sign as a part of town. And frankly, whether it's this meeting today or the meeting we had before, I did not leave the meeting terribly optimistic that this would turn into anything. At our meeting today, the president was very frank in his query and just said, is there financing to support this? And we didn't have answers because there are no answers yet. And there was a question posed to, there were two legislators in the room, but Julie was the only one there when the question was posed to her. And she said there will be a session in February, and it's an opportunity then that a request will be made for additional monies given the gap year, 24-25. The gap year meaning the new school wasn't built, and see if monies could be advocated for in that regard. But as of right now, there is no answers internally, meaning locally, and folks from the state will also ask if they were at the table, because OPM, I think it's maybe the other organization, DAS was also at the table. And both of those folks were asked point blank, can any monies be pulled from your department? And it was also made very clear, we don't have monies available, just in case for someone else's district in cases like this, and not likely to be able to fund this kind of effort. And so we left the meeting today with President Chang asking that Paul and I get together with our respective teams and walk through the campus to see if this is even anything that logistically is even possible. Because the point that he had raised was that we don't even know if it's possible, because we don't even know if your facility can meet the needs of the school. So that was wrong. And so he had urged all of us to do that sooner rather than later, before we waste any more time even just talking about it, because we don't, quite frankly, we don't know if we can meet the needs of our respective needs. But they did encourage us to do a walkthrough of the facility to see if it was even possible, even if granted it's only 1 year, but it would mean a lot. And so Paul and I had agreed that we would revisit both of our calendars really soon, and see if it's matched. And so Paul, meaning the president at WestCon, is going to meet with President Chang ASAP. And then they will get back to us. They also had some, as you might imagine, they had some strong concerns about having students 15 through 17 on the college campus. They had some strong, as do we, by the way, had some strong concerns about our ability to isolate them from the college campus and the college community. But they also had concerns about the campus turning into a high school versus being a college campus, and what that would be, could be for their potential work as they're trying to build up enrollment at the school. So again, I left the meeting today probably as I certainly didn't leave the meeting today optimistic, didn't really leave last meeting optimistic. Again, the president changed to his credit, asked a very straightforward questions about money. And at this time, we do not have answers for the costs associated with advancing this conversation moving further. So I understand that there's likely to be some questions tonight. I anticipated that in my email this weekend. Certainly happy to answer that.
So I just have a question, so the exploratory meeting, so how do we go from an exploratory meeting in February to an article that 450 kids are moving to West Palm?
So I don't, that's a good question. So I don't know where the reporter got his information from. My mistake was frankly responding as if, that was my mistake, responding the way I did and providing information through this program. Before we had a discussion, number one, I went to the meeting today and, people at the meeting, and Mike was there, Carol was there, people at the meeting was like, we're just gonna be clear, this is not a done deal, this is far from a done deal. Certainly let them speak, and then I addressed the elephant in the room. I'm well aware that these discussions have been exploratory at best, in that we had not committed to anything in writing or discussion. And again, I don't know where the reporter had his information, but I was responding to what the very detailed questions he was asking, and responded that way, and again, prematurely talk about something that I should not have been talking about.
Just one question. I knew that when we had postponed 1 year off on the career academy, I thought that was the impact around 200 students. So where did the 450 come out of, the additional 200 students?
Michelle did do 200 right now. And so, because we will have about 200 additional students for 24-25, we'll be around 36 this year we're projecting. Then next year it's 200, we're projecting about 3,800. The issue is, and the reason why we came up with this 450 number, if this was to work, is that for us to move 200, and then I can say, Chris, you're gonna teach 2 classes here, and you're gonna go teach 3 classes over there, and then Chris is gonna go, wait a minute, you want me to travel for a period, so now I can only teach 2 here and 2 there. So now we have to find out a way how we're gonna find another teacher to teach that 1 class that Chris said I'm traveling to that time. It's just not cost efficient for us to move 200 and not move 450 and have the whole academy there, or all the teachers there. And so that's what we said, just would be cost efficient. And that's really broad stroke, it just would be cost efficient because it would be first time to the entire staff. Not to mention services coming from special education, services coming from my ESL department, etc. And so when we were trying to have discussions around this, we were really framing it around, it's really 400, it's really an academy or nothing, because as it is, it's gonna cost, the cost would be ridiculous. If we split it, it's really not gonna be cost effective, and by the way, it's still gonna be 200 kids back in the area high school. So that's what we're looking at.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Kevin, for clarifying. Motion, can I get a motion?
Before we adjourn, Mr. Chairman, I can fill this out and bring it up here, or what are we doing, are we not making a decision about it?
No, I think if you take it with you, or fill it out, and get some information. In the meantime, I'm gonna try to get something together with some topics of what, for a workshop, we'd like to, yeah, and then, Gary gets back and maybe send something out and have everybody add something put on there, like what they think about like the academies or a security workshop, something like that. It's just, this worksheet here was to determine, right, if we wanted to have one of these topics or goals as a workshop, right?
Yes, twofold. So one for the superintendent goals, and if it's more appropriate, we can separate the two, and we can go back to this evaluation committee and talk about the goals themselves. And then the workshop, and handle that, but I can follow co-chair of it.
I was just concerned about doing the comments, taking the time to put the comments in. And then I got, I have no problem, putting it in an envelope and bringing it to the government. Doesn't make any difference.
No, I think it's good to take it
However
over.
you plan.
Yeah, I'll, Kevin and I will talk a little bit, and we'll get it out to the full board and what direction we want to go.
For the year of, when school opened and we start back our board meeting in September, if we possibly looked at, because, I'm really kind of getting annoyed every time we have a meeting. You can't hear from the staff. If we have to look at restructuring or however this diagram comes.
Say that again, we can't hear.
How we are sitting as board members, because you can't hear on this side. And when someone's talking over there, you can't hear what they're saying, even if they use the mic. And the people in the audience can't hear what we're saying and don't know who's saying what. So, could we sort of look at, I'm sorry.
Use the mic, Ms. Cooper.
I'm sorry. So if we could sort of look at restructuring how we're sitting, or somehow.
I think proper mic etiquette, I think we need a little tutorial on that, maybe, Ken, but, because it's like, I always feel myself, I have a big mouth, I always feel like, I'm like leaning into it. I mean, what's the proper mic etiquette? Just right here and just talk formally into it?
That's.
I think that's one of the things we should, because I see like talking over here and then the mic's on, but I think we try that before we move some seats around.
Yeah, well, either way, because we can look at September when we start back in our meetings, so we won't have to be going. I'll have a conversation with you on the side.
May I ask, if there's anyone interested in interviewing on Wednesday, I'm running 4 panels.
If there's anyone interested in interviewing for assistant principals on Wednesday, we're actually running 4 panels for 4 buildings. 2 panels in the morning, 2 panels in the afternoon. We're trying to kind of scoot ahead of administrators leaving for the summer and summer school teachers. So if anyone can spare any time, we would appreciate it.
How many board members do you need?
As many as 4, but I take 1 or 2, whatever anybody can spare.
What time are you doing the day? What time?
I'm doing 2 panels for elementary, starting in the morning. I want to say they're starting at 10 on Wednesday at Kingstown School. And I'm doing 2 panels in the afternoon, starting around noontime for the middle school assistant principals in my office.
So it's available, email Ken.
Yes.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn. Teresa, second by Kate, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?